Luffy just tamed a dragon that's bigger than almost every island in the world. The cover page of One Piece chapter 1174, titled "The Strongest in the World," features Roger walking alongside a dinosaur as if it were a puppy. We return to a panicking Saint Summers. The Nika dream demon he knocked aside ended up destroying the vessel that would bring the young giant hostages to the Holy Land. But losing the ship was hardly the only issue here, because now there's a massive hole in the sea clouds. And seeing as he can't stop the arrow's effects from leading them there, it's only a matter of time before the kids fall to their doom and their mission becomes a failure. He tried to tell Gunko to pause the effects of her arrow for a moment, but quickly realized that it's no use since Imu is currently controlling her. Down below, he saw the adults catch up to the kids and focus on the arrow. Ronja's dad hacked at it with an axe. Someone pulled it, and a granny bit it with her dentures, but nothing could so much as scratch it. Saint Summers pointed out the futility of their efforts. If stopping the arrow that way were possible, he would be doing so himself. But now that he thought about it, the parents were trying to save their children, but were unable to touch them due to his thorns. And at this rate, they'll all have no choice but to watch their kids fall below the clouds. The sadistic freak derives sickening pleasure from just the thought of it. Rationalizing even further, he realized that since Gunko is being controlled by the Supreme One, then technically, Mu will be the one responsible for this blunder. And if nothing else, they can always steal some more giant children. Pinning the blame on your superior is certainly a bold choice, especially when they can erase you from existence. With a jostling tongue and putrid smile, the knight longed to see their touching despair. With that, he decided to strengthen the experience by informing the adults that their original plan to steal the children has been compromised by the removal of the ship and Cloud Lair. Speaking plainly, he told the kids that these would be their final moments of life, which he found funny considering how far they've come, which understandably caused them all to panic. Hearing that, Oimo decided that if giving up his arms would be the only way to stop them, then that's a price he is willing to pay. He tried to grab his grandson and was pierced by the thorns. Summers told them that there's no way to stop the inevitable. Overhearing all this, Saint Keelingham grew frustrated by this alteration to their plans. Oimo was being dragged along and experiencing severe pain. His grandson begged him to let go, and when he did, the giant could only beg for forgiveness. Looking at his hands, he confirmed to the others just how helpless they all are here. But it wasn't like they could just sit around and do nothing. If the kids fall into the realm of the dead, there won't even be a trace of them left. The demons were toying with their lives, as indeed, Saint Summers was pleased to the point of tears. Mag suggested that they must have done something bad to deserve such a fate, believing that this had to be divine punishment. Olaf questioned his meaning, while Ylva always heard something similar when she got in trouble. Scaldi agreed, and lamented his failure to be a good boy. They all seemed to think that this was what they deserved for being bad. With that, they cried, and promised to be good from now on. Saint Summers lifted his shades to get a better look at the finale. Crying, Colin swore that he'd never do anything bad ever again. He remembered his mother Ripley saying that the sun god pays special attention to naughty children. Colin claimed to have won his Emmett doll in a duel, but considering the whole non-violence thing, it was probably more like bullying. So she pinched his ear and told him that the strong should look out for the weak, before forcing him to go say sorry. Ylva sobbed. She remembered refusing to eat her food and making her mom think that she hates her cooking, when in reality, she just doesn't like carrots. Scaldi was scolded by his mother for taking his father's sword, despite her many warnings, and just covered his ears in defiance. Olaf told his grandpa Oimo that he hates him, and that his crew of pirate savages all stink. Karin's mother wanted her daughter to stop lying. After all, she can't protect her if she's being lied to. Mag shouted at his mom for bringing him his homework when he intentionally left it behind because he didn't do it. They all cried out in fear. Colin wailed for his mother. And that's when Ripley rushed to the edge and opened her arms to him while calling his name. She embraced him in a gentle hug, despite the thorns. She apologized. While she couldn't stop him from moving, she could at least do this. The pain was tremendous, and Colin gritted his teeth at the sight of it. He shouted that if she doesn't let go, then she'll fall along with him. But Ripley was accepting of that, because it's better than letting her little boy leave this world alone. They fell, and the other parents held their children in the same way. The kids were overwhelmed by grief as their guardians held them close, while St. Summers couldn't have wished for a more pleasurable finish. The ever-optimistic Ronja insisted that they'd all be just fine and saved, but as she walked off the edge, her father grabbed hold of her, smiling despite the pain. He told her how proud of her he is. Bent was held by his mother. He remembered claiming that she's his biggest fear in class. Now, he deeply apologized to her for it, but smiling, his mom doesn't mind being scary. Being his fierce mother, she lives to protect him. Approaching her own end, the orphan Joanna stifled her tears while thinking about how nice it must be to have parents like theirs. She remembered Anj trying to be there for her, only to be rebuffed by the fact that she's not her mom. But the teacher ran all the way here to grab her all the same. Joanna's emotions flooded out of her with her tears. Bjorn was the last one to go. He remembered telling his brother Rode to stay away from his school, since it was way too embarrassing to have a nerd like him for a big brother. Abashed but smiling, Rode proposed being discreet so they wouldn't notice him. Now scowling at his own cruelty, Bjorn considered the concept of divine punishment, as rushing from a slightly lower position, his brother affectionately shouted his name. The otherwise cowardly pirate caught his brother and swore that he's just fine and doesn't feel any pain. Bjorn wailed. As watching them all fall, St. Summers couldn't stop wailing with laughter. To the demon, this was like seeing poetry in motion. He couldn't make sense of the additional losses at all. Tears, snot, and drool spewed from his face as he mocked the parents for their foolishness. He was truly moved by their beautiful, meaningless ends. But that's when it began to snow. The giants all fell onto a massive surface that was on something else of incomprehensible size. Still alive, Ripley turned to her son and asked him where they were. The kid wasn't really sure, but told her that they're all safe. The other children were similarly tending to their guardians. Luffy dubbed this move Gum Gum Rice Cracker Belly, but they were really digging into him, so he shouted at them to get off already. Then they were confused by Luffy's presence. This was followed up by a monster shouting at the Yonko. Once they land, he wants the pirate to get off his back since he doesn't want him getting involved in his fight. While the mention of this surface being its back confused all the new arrivals. In Gear 5, Luffy claimed that they were lucky to have been passing by when they all fell down out of nowhere. Ticked off, the monster told him not to co-sign their presence. As the Great Destroyer, he refused to be responsible for anyone's safety. But it's time for them to get going. Meanwhile, St. Summers was puzzled by the sudden fall of snow. And even more strangely, he's pretty sure he just heard thunder. Something major was going on. Lightning was striking. The tree itself was shifting and wobbling. And there was an odd drumming sound. In West Village, the defending residents questioned the sudden beat. All of Elbaf was shaking. But the oldest living giant, the ever-poetic Elder Ja Rule, began to quote scripture. On a day of thunder and snow, a colossal beast shall blot out the skies. The drums of liberation will boom out. Mega mountainous spines rose above the foliage. St. Summer shuddered with a dismayed expression that shattered all of his previous enjoyment, and an emu-controlled Gunko shifted their gaze. And the sun god will rise! In his massive Gear 5 form, Luffy sat atop a draconic Loki, the biggest creature we have ever seen. The pirate couldn't stop laughing about how ridiculously big his future crewmate has gotten, sure that the events to come would be full of hilarity, all while the colossal dream monsters were dwarfed and tossed like toys. And Ragnir squeaked its delight. Absolute madness! And at this point, there should be no doubt that the previous user of Loki's Devil Fruit is the dragon depicted on the Void Sentry mural. And with how obscenely huge this form is, in the possession of a full-blood ancient giant, I can totally see how the red line could be the result of his corpse. Poor Kaido was never the world's strongest creature. I mean, even the chapter title revoked his claim. But if Shanks really did beat Loki, then at least his claim of Haki transcending all is still true. Their clash being something that was foreshadowed all the way back with the cover of chapter 59, where the red-maned lion Richie has a dream in which he defeats a dark dragon while out at sea. And big dragon aside, I'm really impressed by all the strong facial expressions in this chapter. The emotional connections were really touching. But between dragons and parental sacrifices, I can think of a certain someone who Luffy needs to meet next. And I hope you'll be here for the next one. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.